Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the entrepreneurial mindset and the lean startup approach. Why do you need a lean startup approach? Actually, we do say that ideas are important, opportunities are important. It's important to think that through. However, when it comes to the truth, it's all about execution. Idea maybe counts a little bit, maybe counts a little more, maybe if you're in a specific sector like biotechnology, patents and so on, it's a lot more important. However, the execution is most important also for startup success. And that's actually the motivation for a lean startup. I mean, if you do look at these two examples, Tesla, well known nowadays for producing electronic cars, one of the biggest producers, at least nowadays, with big revenues in 2019, going on in 2020 and so on. Is this a great idea? Well, it's a cool idea to build that kind of car. However, is this new, is this revolutionary? Has this never been there before? Well, we know that the New York taxi fleet was electric in 120 years ago. However, also in the past, there were more approaches to that, like in 1996, when General Motors put the EV1 on the market. And that was actually the first electric car worldwide. GM started the production in 1996. However, they had to close the production in 1999 with only a little more than 1,000 cars sold. So what's the difference? I mean, both companies basically have the idea to sell an electronic car. Is there a difference between the two? Well, the idea might sound the same pretty much. I mean, there's at least slight differences, but maybe you might call them big differences between the two. A lot more important is the difference in execution. And the question is, what is the entrepreneurial way to execute something? And if we do remember what we saw before, it's the question of how to deal with uncertainty or how to be risky. We have to be careful if we want to be precise to differentiate risk from uncertainty. However, in the entrepreneurship space, many times people basically consider this as the same. So risk is not black and white. There's not like a risk which you can't calculate. Is this the uncertainty? A risk which is very low. The main task you have if you're facing risk or if you're facing uncertainty is to reduce it. Basically, reducing the uncertainty for your business, basically try to manage the risks. And every new venture has risk attached. Every venture has, if it's more radical, has uncertainty attached. But this can be managed, and how this can be managed is the effectual approach. We saw that. We don't project, we start from what we have, and we work ourselves into market, company, and so on at the same time. And that's the main idea, to say, okay, if I do face the uncertainty of not knowing that people buy that kind of car, and General Motors ended up with a little more than 1,000, what do I do? And then I will set an affordable loss, which is out of chapter 2 from the effectual thinking, and try to step into a market with some kind of minimum viable product in order to reduce the biggest uncertainty. So what I do is, first of all, I'll go to back to the entrepreneurial principles. I start understanding my means orientation. That's the wrong one. I love this one. My means orientation. So what am I able to do right now? Then I do set an affordable loss, which is my view of risk and return, which is not a risk return, but stepping into the market. And by having set an affordable loss, which I can afford, I try to enhance my problem space by looking for new partnerships that can help me in reducing the uncertainty without maybe having to pay for that too much. But how do I actually execute then the market entry? That's the big question at that moment. And the Tesla versus GM story to some extent shows into that kind of direction, because the difference is the product validation and finding the market need. What GM did is they developed an electric car that did not meet the needs. They basically did it by themselves. They developed that car. They spent quite a decent amount of money, but that, for example, could only be sold in warm regions, because in other climates the battery didn't make it. So that was one of the problems. Only leasing options were provided. It hasn't been sold, and so on. So there were a couple issues associated with that. What did Tesla do? Actually, they said, first of all, we have to know if people are open to buy an electric car. So they took a Lotus and exchanged basically the combustion engine. A very cheap way of stepping into the market, coming from the high end of the market, where you always find people who are willing to pay for something extraordinary. And this is how they stepped into the market. So they stepped into the market from a more luxurious position, and they used a lot of standard systems that have been used before, just put them together in also some crazy cool of product. And that was their first product, and we would call it a minimum viable product. That was the minimum they could do in order to try to reduce the uncertainty, because that was the most important point to know if people are open to buy that kind of car. And actually, people were open. This is why Tesla went into that market further and further. So where are we right now? We are stepping into understanding what minimum viable products could be. So how the first product could look like. And this is the first product which you use to validate your problem solution fit. Remember, you're going out to the customer, you try to understand the customer problem. This is why you can't stay at home, you can't stay in your building, you have to get out of the building. Remember what Steve Blank said. But then if you do understand the problem, you have to find a solution, and that's the minimum viable product, because that shows you how to really tackle the market. And what you can do is then, and that'll be the next step, use the business model canvas, and this is what we're going to do in that chapter, to also define the product market fit, to also go further. So what you do is basically, and we'll look deeper into the Lean Startup approach, you'll use the Lean Startup approach, and especially this so-called minimum viable product, remember the Tesla story, to step into the market, and then try to understand the financials of the market further into finding the product market fit. And this makes you successful as an entrepreneur.